600 years before Christ, under the scorching Egyptian sun, 50,000 Persian soldiers marched west into the unforgiving desert. They were led by King Cambyses II, the ambitious son of Cyrus the Great, whose campaigns of conquest had transformed Persia into the greatest empire the world was to know. Cambyses wanted to outdo his father and had already invaded Egypt, defeating Pharaoh Psamtik III in the Battle of Pelusium in 525 BC. That victory had secured for Persia the supremacy over the region, but as far as Cambyses was concerned, that was only a beginning. He wanted to clinch his authority by reaching as far as the Siwa oasis, home of the famous Oracle of Ammon, known for its prophecies and divinity. Its conquest would be more than the triumph of armies. It would mean taking a grip over a center of great religious and political consequence. The march from Thebes began with determination. For centuries, the city of Thebes, humming with life along the banks of the Nile, had been one of Egyptian culture's strongest points, its bustle of markets and temples echoing with the sounds of daily activity. The lush green landscape turned into an endless pale desert that punished unprepared travelers. By day, a burning sun roasted the sand into being searing to the touch. By night, chilling cold set in. It seemed to open into infinity and reminded him that there was still far to go. The first few days tested the soldiers' endurance. The supplies of water, carefully rationed from the beginning, started showing signs of running low. The men marched on, their armor reflecting the relentless sun, sustained only by rumors of a distant oasis. They were told that in 7 days' time the march would be over, and they would have rest and water at Siwa. But the more one went inland, the more the dunes appeared as endless, shifting veils, reforming with every gust of wind, with no index to gauge progress, only becoming more disoriented. Their doubt began seeping into their ranks. Herodotus, writing about 100 years later, tells the rest of the story. When the army had reached the middle of the desert, he says, a furious and devastating storm blew down upon them. The storm burst upon them, raging and pitiless, and obscured the sun in a vast vortex of swirling sand which overwhelmed the troops. The army, having paused at noon as a precaution, was overtaken by the storm, which then buried them without a trace. Herodotus's story was blessed and doubted for centuries thereafter. An event like this taking out an entire army of 50,000 men. The desert, it so happened, could do such a thing, but even so, the story stretched belief for many. Over time, the story of Cambyses' lost army became a topic of debate among historians and archaeologists. Was Herodotus exaggerating, as he was known to do? Or had Cambyses really sent an army to its doom, only to have it swallowed by the sands? The skepticism persisted, fed by doubts over the plausibility of such a huge force being consumed without survivors. Some felt the numbers of Herodotus were exaggerated, as often happened in ancient writings. Others advanced different endings for the army. The storm may have come, but it came after they had been decisively weakened by dehydration and exposure, or their ending was not as uncomplicated as a natural disaster. One theory suggests the army was sent to the desert, but ambushed by local forces loyal to a rebel Egyptian leader. The name of this leader was called Petubastis III. He was one of these several pretenders to the title of pharaoh who waged an insurrection against the Persian rule. It might have been possible for his forces to intercept Cambyses' army, defeat it, and strip it of their valuable weapons and armor, leaving the bodies to be buried by time and sand. An ambush would add an element of strategy to what otherwise appears as a miscalculated gamble pulled off by Cambyses. In the 19th century, interest in Herodotus's tale sparked serious searches for evidence. Explorers entered the inhospitable desert, risking life and limb in the hope of stumbling on the remnants of what might finally confirm the ancient legend. One such explorer, known as the English Patient, Count Laszlo Almasi, spent an entire decade from the early 20th century crossing the treacherous dunes in search of the army's last stand. He came back with fantastical stories to tell, but no actual proof. The scholars discovered, decades later, fragments of pottery, every weapon, and bones scattered all over the desert. But such findings often predated Cambyses's time, or did not have explicit links with the Persian force. Since the Egyptian government controls all archaeological discoveries, their findings were considered invalid due to a lack of official authorization. The so-called discovery remained at the level of imagination as no formal excavation or verification was conducted. But despite technological advances, from the latest ground-penetrating radar to satellite imaging, say archaeologists, there is no definitive evidence for Cambyses's lost army. Hundreds of thousands of square miles of desert is a pretty good masker of secrets. While satellite technology has mapped areas of shifting dunes and uncovered possible sites of ancient activity, pinpointing a specific site linked with the Persian army is going to be the greatest challenge. Cambyses's defeat is more of a cautionary tale about reckless ambition battling unforgiving nature. The campaign for Cambyses was less about a military adventure than it was about a demonstration of power, an assertion of divine will. To conquer the Siwa oasis would be to reinforce his dominance and quiet descent within his expanding empire. But here, ambition against the wilderness stood helpless. The dunes swallowing his men were a symbol of the perverse inability of nature to account for human will. His subsequent death, a few years later under mysterious circumstances, passed the empire to Darius I, who worked his way to stabilize Persian rule and blot out memories of the failures of his forerunner. This defeat, rarely mentioned in the Persian records, stayed in the psyche as a lesson in the fickle nature of conquest and the limits of the reach of the emperor. Generations later, the legend of the lost army lived on, whispered between the dunes and passed on through histories. The possibility that Cambyses's soldiers' bones are buried beneath the Sahara's sands is tantalizing. Every find of ancient pottery or remains instills hope that one day the sands may give up their secrets. Until such time, the fate of the lost army stands as a tribute to the power of nature and as a warning against overambitious reach. The desert holds on to its secrets, and even now the modern explorer presses the search. But the tale of the lost army of Cambyses holds out the lesson that not every secret buried beneath the dunes will be disclosed. If this story fascinated you, ring that like bell, hit that comment, and subscribe for more deep dives into the unsolved mysteries of history. Drop your theories down below in the comments, and let the conversation begin. End on what might still be buried beneath the sands of time, beneath the sands